Sanhedrin Daf Beis Amud Aleph, behind closed doors. Amra Ninsev. What really happened behind the closed doors between David HaMelech and Avishag Hashunamit? We started learning a little bit about that episode. The Book of Kings, the Book of Malachim, starts with the weirdest story and a strange way to start a Sefer in Tanakh, a strange way for Tanakh altogether. It's an episode that I've searched for explanation of for 70 years, and I haven't found until today. So I'll save you the 70 years and share it with you. We'll learn the power of self-mastery and its capacity to generate Kedusha in the process of that. The story, you know, Va'amelech David Zaken Ba B'yamim, King David's very old. They try and warm him up. He just isn't able to find warmth. His servants say to him, Yevakshu la'adoni Amelech nara betula. Let's find a young girl, previously unmarried, no previous relationships. Ve'amda lifnei Hamelech utehi lo sochenet. And let her stand before the king and be her. Let her take care of him. V'shachva b'chekecha. Not only that, but she can share your bed. V'cham la'adoni Hamelech, and then you will find warmth. Vayivakshu nara yafa b'chol gvil Yisrael. They looked for the most beautiful woman all over Israel. Vayimsu'u et Avishag Hashunamit. Vayaviu ota lamelech. They bring this beautiful, gorgeous young girl to the aging king. Hanara yafa admod. She's extremely beautiful. Vatehi lamelech sochenet. And she served the king. She took care of the king. V'tasharteyu. She served him. V'hamelech lo yeda'ah. But the king at no times had intimate relations with her. That's the story. And there are some serious difficulties with the story. Firstly, as we were learning yesterday, the question of yichud. We talked about this gzer, which King David's own Beis Din instituted, that even with an unmarried girl, you can't be alone. We're not even talking about being alone with her. She's not working as his secretary. Well, she's doing that as well, but she's sharing his bed at the same time. Where does that come from? How do they do such a thing? How does King David do such a thing? Secondly, Rabbi Yitzchak asked after the shir yesterday, he's got 18 wives. If he needs body warmth, he's got who to choose from, and it's all kosher. Why bring in the 19th woman, a young girl? What is that about? A great question. And more than that, the Rambam paskins based on a Gemara we'll get to on Daf Ayin Hey. Mishenatan einav b'isha v'chala v'nata lamut. If a person falls in love with a woman and he's so in love that he's about to die. And the doctors say the only way to cure this man is that he has relationships with her. Let him die rather than have relations with her. That's how the Rambam paskins l'halacha. That's one of the things for which you have to give your life. This is Gilui Arayot. Whereas for everything else, life comes first. For the three cardinal averot, Gilui Arayot, Shfichut Damim, and Avodah Zarah, you're not permitted to put life first. You're not allowed to do the aver no matter what, even if this person is going to die, unless he has relationships with this woman who is an unmarried woman. Not allowed to. Let him die. You don't even suggest that they talk to each other behind a mechitza. Rather let him die. Rather that than to suggest that they speak together. It just breaks down barriers. It's not a healthy thing for society, and it breaks down the barriers, and that's something that shouldn't be. That's what the Rambam says. If that's what we paskin, that comes from our own Gemara. How does David HaMelech, how does the Beis Din allow David HaMelech to warm himself up using the body of an innocent young girl? It's very difficult to understand. It gets even weirder. So let's get into the Gemara. The Gemara says, Avishag Maihi. Who exactly was this Avishag? What was their relationship? Because the Gemara starts off saying questions as to whether she could marry Shlomo after David's death, but she couldn't marry Adoniyahu, why that is, and so on. Tichtiv, and it brings the psukim. So says the Gemara, at some point, Amra ninaspan. She says to David HaMelech, I'm feeling uncomfortable in this relationship. Which one can understand? It just doesn't feel right. Why don't we get married and make it all okay, make it all kosher? Amala asiratli. It says David HaMelech, I'm a frum man, I can't do that. I've got 18 wives already, Rashi explains. I'm not allowed to have more than 18. That's it. I've reached my limit. Sorry, can't marry you. Amrale, she says to him, Chasre leganve nafshe lishlama nakid. When a thief runs out of what to steal, he becomes a tzaddik. Why have you retired from thievery? I'm a tzaddik, I'm doing tshuva. David HaMelech, you clearly have run out of energy. You're too old for this kind of thing. And now you make yourself a tzaddik. You don't want to marry me because you've got 18 wives already. It's not because of that. It's just because you don't have it in you to have relations with me. That's what it's really all about. She says to the king, what is David HaMelech? How does David HaMelech deal with this? Amalu, he said to them, Kir'uli lebat sheva. Really, Avishag? That's what you think? Okay. Call Batsheva, his wife. It says that Batsheva came into the room. It's a delicate way of saying they had intimacy 13 times consecutively. David and Batsheva, this old man. And then he turns to Avishag and he says, really? You think I haven't got it within me? That's not the reason. It's got nothing to do with that. It's interesting, says the Gemara, that at no time did they suggest to David, divorce one of your wives so you'll only have 17 and then you can marry Avishag and everything's kosher. They rather were matir yichud for him. Don't forget, they were the very Beis Din who instituted this yichud. They were the ones who said a man cannot be alone with an unmarried woman. So that same Beis Din is saying, in this case, for David HaMelech, we're allowing it. Rather than to suggest a divorce, and the Gemara goes into a whole beautiful piece of Gemara about how, although divorce is something which is allowed in the Torah, it's built into the whole marriage process, and there's good reason for that, but still it's something that is a very sad thing to do and something to be avoided wherever possible. That's the Gemara. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But to understand it, I saw a reference to a Vilna Gaon. Now, I haven't seen the Vilna Gaon inside, and I usually don't bring anything in the Matmonim that I haven't seen in context. It's one of the diseases of our time, that things are quoted out of the context. How can you understand a piece of Torah or a piece of anything without understanding the context? And one of the guilty offenders of that principle is a man who wrote a wonderful sefer. It's called Daf al Daf. It's a collection. He's a Geira Chosid. He was close to the Geira Rebbe. And the Geira Rebbe got him into learning Daf Yomi. And all the years he's learned Daf Yomi, and he's made an anthology of all sorts of things on the Daf that one wouldn't normally come across. I specifically don't use it for that very reason. I don't like to import things onto the Daf. I like to learn in an inside-out process, not an outside-in process. That's how I was taught to learn. You develop things from the Daf. You develop ideas from the Daf. As you learn an idea in depth, then various things are sparked, various ideas are sparked, various ideas distilled and come to the surface, and you pull it out of the Gemara itself. It comes from the Gemara itself. You're struggling with a difficulty, you're struggling with a question, you find a Rishon or an Akron who has an approach that helps, but it's all from inside out, rather than just having an anthology of all sorts of ideas and thoughts and things that various different people have said. But it's a very useful sefer for Daf Yomi learners who are not able to do Matmonim on their own. They can it adds some spice to the Daf Yomi process. And the only place I could find this Vilna Gaon was quoted in that sefer, quoting it from another sefer. I couldn't get close to it, but it is so good that I feel very sure that the Vilna Gaon did say this. It's based on the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, although he doesn't quote it. Ezoi tshuva gemura. What is proper tshuva? Zeh sheba liyado davar she'avar bo ve'efshar biyado la'asoto ufiresh v'lo asa mipnei tshuva. Tshuva gemura is when you have an opportunity to do the same avera again and you hold back and you don't do it. Lo miyira v'lo mikishalon koach. Not because you're afraid that somebody will see you, and not because you're too weak. Ketzad. Harishibali shab avera. Person has a forbidden relationship with a woman. Ulachaz manit yachedima, and it happens that later on he finds himself alone with her in a hotel room. I don't know how they find themselves there, but they found themselves alone in the hotel room. He is as in love with her as he ever was. With a koach gufo, and he's strong and he's virile. He's at the same place. He's on the French Riviera, very romantic spot that they're at. He's not stuck in the middle of an office block. He's in a beautiful area. Ufiresh, and he doesn't touch her. V'lo avar, and he doesn't do the avera. Ze bal tshuva gemara. This is total tshuva. The Rambam goes on to say there are other forms of tshuva. It's not as if there's no tshuva if you don't get to that point, but that's total tshuva. Now says the Vilna Gaon. כשהזקין דוד הרגיש שעדיין לא תיקן החטא של בת שבע. David's about to die, and he feels in his soul he hasn't yet completed the tshuva for Bat Sheva. It's still bothering him. ויחסר לו למעלה חלוקה דרבנן. There's a concept in Kabbalah. I quote at the bottom, the Shevet Musa spends a whole parak explaining what this chalukah d'Rabbanan is. But basically, it's the neshama gets clothed after death with beautiful clothes woven out of the mitzvahs people did during their lifetime. And when that clothing is complete, the Shevet Musa explains, that's when a soul can come back to earth in a physical form. And he talks about the angels that visited Avraham Avinu and various other examples of where a neshama is able to come back in a physical form because it has this beautiful garment. It's an energetic garment. It's an external garment that gives the soul the ability to function even in a physical way. And that's called chalukah d'Rabbanan. And David HaMelech feels he doesn't have chalukah d'Rabbanan. And he self-analyzes and he self-reflects. And he concludes the only reason he doesn't have chalukah d'Rabbanan is because of Bat Sheva. And that's why he couldn't get warm with all the clothes that were put on him. Whatever he looked at, all the mitzvahs he's done, whatever he tried, he couldn't feel warm inside. לכן כדי לעשות תשובה באותו מקום ובאותו זמן הביא לו את אבישג שתשרתהו. So here was the idea. Let's find the most beautiful young girl in the land. And as the Ralbag says on this piece of Tanakh, David had a liking for women. That was a strength and a weakness of him. The Ralbag is very honest. He loved women. We know that. So, okay, let's get the most beautiful woman and bring her to take care of him. V'lo nesa'a, and not to marry her. V'amra she'ulai batel mimenu hakocho, and she says, why aren't you doing anything? I'm such a beautiful girl, and we're alone here. We're sleeping in the same bed. What's going on? You're not touching me? You don't want to get married? You don't want to do anything? Clearly, you don't have the strength. Lachen kara levat sheva laharot she'adayin kocho imo. So he wanted to demonstrate both to her and to himself that he's still fully virile. The reason he's not interested in Avishag is not because there's anything wrong with him. On the contrary, afal peke nimna velo nasa et Avishag kedei la'asot tshuvat hamishkal. And so he says to Avishag, I'm sorry, I can't marry you. If I marry you, the whole thing falls to pieces. Then once again, I've got no chalukah d'Rabbanan. Once again, I haven't finished my tshuva for Avishag, for Bat Sheva. Don't you realize you are the biggest gift I've been given? Because through you, I can master my yetzer. I can master my passion. I can hold back in a way I didn't with Bat Sheva. And that way I can do proper teshuvah. Yes, the Gemara says they didn't allow, why didn't they suggest to him to divorce, that he had 18 wives? Rashi learns that the reason he said that he couldn't marry her was because of the 18 wives. Maybe that's what he told her. I'm not sure. And the question of the Gemara is, so why didn't they suggest that he divorces a wife? And the Gemara deals with that. But the Vilna Gaon is going into what's going on in David's mind. Whether David actually said that to her or didn't, we don't know. But in David's mind, it is, I can't marry this woman as much as I would love to. As much as I would, my passion would be to do that. I can't do that because if I do that, I'm back to square one and I haven't fulfilled my my tshuva for Avishag Hashunamit. And that's the first time that I've had any kind of explanation of this piece of Tanakh that makes sense and explains in terms of David HaMelech of what was really going on and why the Gemara, which is even strange as we said, he finds it necessary to be intimate with Bathsheba 13 times. What's he proving? Well, who's he trying to prove? What's he trying to prove? He's trying to prove to himself that there's nothing wrong with his passion. There's nothing wrong with his virility. On the contrary, he's as youthful as he ever was in that way. But he needs to get over the chet. And that's the Rashi on Parshas Kedoshim, where the Rashi says, Kedoshim to you, aviprushim min ha'arayotu min ha'avera, shekol makom she'ata motzei geder erva, ata motzei Kedusha. Kedusha happens when there's enormous resistance. Just as when there's enormous resistance, the lights go on. If you pass electrons through a filament and there's a lot of resistance, you get light and you get energy. Kedusha works the same thing. If you pass passion through resistance and you hold back your passions for Torah, that creates Kedusha. People always want sanctity, they always want to experience Kedusha, but people want Kedusha passively. I want to go to the Kotel and feel Kedusha. It doesn't work that way. You want to feel Kedusha, you've got to create the environment for Kedusha, and the way you do it is through self-mastery. Through wanting to do something that Ramban says, even things that are mutar, just be able to cut down. I want to do something excessive, cut it down, not necessary. The mere process of saying no is a place that lets in Kedusha. To be able to say no to yourself. To be able to say no to other people is hard. But to be able to say no to yourself, that's the way that Kedusha comes. And David knew he still had one more job to do in his life. He had to find himself in the same situation where he could say no to himself instead of giving in, because that would give him that ability for Kedusha. And the Chofetz Chaim says it's not only with these kinds of averas, with Lashon Hara it applies as well. It's so easy and we're so tempted to say a bad word about somebody, to say no to yourself and hold back when nobody's ever going to know that. It's interesting that the Gemara, that Hillel turns around, the V'ahavta l'recha kamoch, instead of love your neighbor as yourself, ma'adasani lach, ma'adalach sani, don't do to others what's hateful to you. It's harder to say no to yourself than to say yes. To do a chesed for somebody, that requires sacrifice, it requires generosity. But to hold back from doing harm to somebody, to hold back from a word of Lashon Hara or from an unpleasant expression about somebody, to hold back, that's much more difficult. And that holding back is the idea of geder erva and avera, of holding yourself back, creating geder, creating distance between oneself and an avera, and that opens the gateway for Kedusha to flow in. And so David is able to recover his chalukah derabanan. Avishag serves this amazing purpose of enabling David to recover from the chet, which was the thing that troubled him most of all as he approached his own old age and death.